Ladies and gentlemen,
I hunger, coward.
You are now listening to Retro Radio.
Welcome to another edition of Retro Radio, your only comprehensive online source for classic arcade and computer gaming emulation news and information. I'm Shane R. Monroe, your host. Welcome to the program. Well, the show is only a couple of days late, and considering the crazy holiday season that's behind us, I think I'm doing pretty dang good. This week's editorial/commentary section deals with the making of Retro Radio. I've gotten tons of letters and messages on IRC regarding the making of this show. How do I do it? What does it take? How do I interview? All that jazz. So this week, I reveal what goes into this bi-weekly show. The first stage of the show depends on whether or not I have an interview. Although lately I haven't had too many, I do plan to do more in the near future. Fortunately, a majority of interviewees are computer literate, and this allows me to conduct the interview via compressed audio over email or FTP. I compose my questions in an email and then send them over first. This gives my interviewee a chance to get his answers ready. Then I shoot him over an MP3 of my questions in audio, so that he can respond directly, knowing my inflections and rhythms and so forth. This ensures that the questions and answers mix more cleanly during the next step. He then records his answers using a freebie or his own preferred wave creator and then converts it to MP3. Then emails or FTPs it back to me. I then decompress it, mix it with my own questions using Cool Edit Pro, the audio editor of champions, and that finishes one segment of the show. If I'm not interviewing, such as this show, I prepare a simple script, basic concepts and layout, and go to it. If I prepare the script too much, I run the risk of it sounding too staged and canned. And if I don't prepare it enough, I might to death, and we don't want to do that. I'm getting pretty good beat on the show now. Once I record the editorial in Cool Edit Pro, I save it off, and that'll conclude the first segment of the show. The emulation update, of course, is very similar. I compile all the latest information I feel my listeners would care to hear and record it the same as the editorial. The 8-bit Flashback segment actually requires more preparation and effort than any other. Since I spent the last 8 years, or I've spent a total of 8 years with the C64 family, I've had more than enough favorites of little-known games to share with my audience to fill this show's segment for years to come. But I do have to do a bit of work, sometimes workarounds, to get the segment contents. As you know, there are some games that only work with some emulators. Some games, such as last show's Ultimate Wizard, wouldn't run on CCS64 properly, cutting off my ability to record the sound output for the intro sound clip of the segment. The game would run fine, however, on C64S, allowing me to get my screenshots. So in order to record the segment sound for Ultimate Wizard, I was considering running both the emulator and Cool Edit together and running a patch cable from the sound out to the line in, trying to use that full duplex feature of the Sound Blaster. Fortunately, I figured out that Ultimate Wizard's custom loader didn't like the fast load option in CCS64, and the game would indeed run properly if I used a regular slow load. Once I get the sound clip cropped and edited, I arrange the screenshots in a way conducive to the segment's content, which also must be written at this time. I rename the images and sound clip, which I sample down to 22 kilohertz, 8-bit mono, as I do all the audio clips before final mix time. Usually I'll include the show's closing statement in with the 8-bit flashback, since this is usually the last segment of the show anyway. Now that the segments have been independently pre-assembled, I fire up Adobe Premiere 5 and get to work. I load up a pre-created template, which is really only useful for the traditional ladies and gentlemen portion of Retro Radio, since that's the only definitive thing that carries from show to show, and begin merging the show's segments together. The timeline of Premiere is really a pain in the arse when you have so many small clips and images to seam together, but the more I do it, it seems the faster I get at it. Finally, the show is assembled, and I'm ready to export the final product to an AVI. As I'm still using 2 drives to do the show, one 2 gigabyte drive and one 1.6 gigabyte drive, I'm forced to store the content of the show on the 1.6 gigabyte drive and export the show to the larger drive. which is housing my swap file and Adobe temp files. This may not make much sense until you actually have done it, but this setup is very non-conducive to a fast AVI assembly due to the massive swapping. The output AVI is an average of 1.2 gigabytes on its own, which means my boot drive contains Windows 95, Premiere, and very little more to allow me the space I need to compile the AVI. Hence, it makes more sense why I beg my listeners to donate me an old 2-gig drive, to give me an extra drive to output to. And my thanks in advance to Ken, also known as Cycle Jumper, for sending me this drive to arrive sometime in the future. The output of the AVI using this setup takes about 3 hours to compile, sometimes faster, around 2 hours, if I don't touch the computer while it works. And this is running on a Celeron 300A, which has the cache overclocked to 374 on a 83 megahertz bus. This time lapse means that if I forget anything when I compile the show, which happened several times on the last show, I have to give myself a considerable amount of rework time to get a new compiled AVI. Now that the AVI is created, I review it. Sometimes if the settings aren't quite on, I get sound skipping, often heard but ignored in the MP3 version, which really makes the show sound crappy, and I end up upping the video frame rate to keep the audio in sync, then recreating the AVI, another 2 to 3 hours. This problem is often the reason the show is a day or two late. Rework. Once the AVI is done right, I'm ready to encode it to Real Player G2 format using the Real Player G2 publisher. This takes about a third to a half of the actual running time of the show. It's too bad this isn't a step that ever requires the rework. The final size of the Real Player G2 file is about 7 megabytes or so, the one you download at 3 to 4 megabytes compressed in zip format when you can't get an available stream or you download it at Dave's Classics. Usually I upload this version first, the streaming version, to my server, then remote control into my server, uncompress the zip into the real server's content folder, and create a launch file for it. The zip gets shoved into the archive folder for download by the public. I then update the HTML page with the show information, and the streaming version is ready to roll. After I get the streaming G2 and download people ready, I prepare the other version or versions of the show, such as the MP3 edition for the Mac users. This will usually end up on the page in the next 24 to 48 hours or so. One of the biggest problems with getting the show updated on the page is that for some reason, Windows NT's Internet Information Server likes to lock out any HTML file that's currently in use or that has been in use over the last 5 to 10 seconds or so. Therefore, I can't update the Retro Radio page if the server has it locked up, which is most of the time. The only way I can get the page updated is to actually go into work where the server is, pause or stop the HTTP services of Monroe World, write the new page, then restart it. If anyone out there knows a way of turning this, quote, feature, unquote, of Internet Information Server off, please email me. This is a constant thorn in my side. Yeah, imagine having to shut down a Microsoft product down and back up before it works right. Yeah, big surprise there. No, I can't use Apache or some other web server for Monroe World. It resides on my company server. The boss wants NT, so the boss gets NT. Well, that about wraps up the editorial section of the show. I hope I answered everyone's questions about how the show gets put together. You will notice I didn't get into specifics of how to run Premiere, the settings I used, etc. That's just a bit too much detail for this show. Plus, those of you wanting to do similar shows need to figure these things out on your own. In many cases, the settings to be used will vary from content to content, and you have to experiment on your own anyway. Besides, this isn't the main project. I'm not obligated to share the source code. Okay, let's get into the emulation update now. We've got a lot of ground to cover. First, let's update with MAME. MAME version 0.34 final is now available. Since I discussed the beta in the last few shows, I'm not going to go into mass details on all the new ROM sets it supports. There are, of course, lots of additional sets, merge sets, bootlegs, etc. as per normal. But I will go over some of the cool driver updates. First, let me get the Neo Geo stuff out of the way. 99% of sound support is implemented. If your sound doesn't work right, the game ROMs are dumped bad. Don't hound the authors, the site ops, the MAME IRC channel members about it. Read the what's new.txt file that comes with MAME completely from top to bottom to figure out what's going on. Okay, Now, back to the good stuff. I'm just going to run them down sort of in order of the what's new file to give you guys an idea. The Mario Brothers screen finally bounces when you hit POW. There's backdrop support for Discs of Tron. There's fixed graphics in Championship Baseball. The flickering sprites in Super Space Invader are fixed as well as sound added. And let me tell you, Super Space Invaders kicks major ass. High-resolution sprites in Blasteroids. Sound in Gladiator. Bubble Bobble's music is now synced properly. Fixed speech in Choplifter. Gyrus sound filtering improves sound quality. Sound in Mysterious Stones. Pitch and sound fixed in Donkey Kong. Woohoo! Sound in all working System 16 games. Improved speech and sound in Gorf. Thanks for this one, you guys. That rocks. Stereo output for certain applicable games like the Atari System 2 games, Paperboy, Peter Packrat, etc. The original elevator action set now works, but it does work more slowly than the bootleg set since there's still a missing CPU in there that's slowing it down. Frontline now has collision detection. Woo! Fanfare inserted here. While not 100% accurate, it sure does improve the game, and you guys totally rock to get this working. Many other fixes and such. These are just the icing on the cake. Go through it. This has been a very, very busy release. Something of note, the high score saving routines are a bit rewritten, and they cause your existing high scores to corrupt, not be displayed right, blah, blah, blah. Read the What's New file for all the information on this, but at least it's forewarned is forearmed. A new command, and there are many to check out, is called List Info. And this will tell you some amazing details about the games, including what ROM files it needs, the clone information, and too much more. Very cool. All in all, a huge release, up and above and beyond version 0.33. Well done to the whole team. What was that? The Williams driver. Oh, well. It seems to me that the Williams driver's a bit faster this release. Most exciting. Although Mortal Kombat's still a bit slow to play groovy with sound, but Narc rocks out on my system, which is a G200 AGP card on a Celeron 300A overclocked to 374. I haven't tried the other games like High Impact Football, but I have NFL Blitz for the PC, so I'm pretty much set up for football games. Let's move on to Retrocade. I may cover some old ground here, but I'm sure you'll forgive me. Sound in Blasteroids, Tubin support is getting close. Almost everything is together, and it is running at some 100 frames per second on Neil's PC. The sprite layer is going to slow it down a bit, he says, but it's looking good. Mr. Do has been added, which also kicks ass. There has been progress on the Win32 and Mac versions. Rock on, Brian. Brian also got the 8039 core done. Read this as Donkey Kong series game sound, and is debugging it. Neil estimates that Marble Madness, which is next after Tubin, will run full speed on a P120 with sound. Damn, he's smooth. And finally, Pac-Man dip switches have been added. Now, someone got all excited about this, and I'm not sure what the significance is of that, but I'm sure we'll find out when the next beta comes out. Speaking of which, there's no idea when the next private beta will go out to the testers, just when Tubin's done. We'll keep you up to date. Updates and other emulation. There is a new version of the PSMU, the PlayStation emulator, which is much more exciting. How about I have a computer with a little bit of backbone and guts to it? CCS64 has a new beta out. Rock and roll. I added a Lynx area to Monroe World called the Lynx Lagoon, your one-stop shop for all your Atari Lynx needs. Soon to add manuals, archives to that page for those of you who are taking interest in that. If you have Lynx games that aren't listed there that you can provide me with box shots, that sort of thing, please email me. I'd like to make the Lynx Lagoon the definitive stop for Lynx emulation and Lynx collectors. J-Rock, author of the JAS emulator, told me last night that the Namco System 1 games are now in beta to be added to JAS, starting with Pac-Mania. You know, that's that weird isometric 3D Pac-Man. I got to take a look at that, and it looks really, really nice. And the next one after that's going to be Galaga 88. Finally, after all this time, I don't have to have the TurboGrafx 16 emulator anymore. Right now, everything but music and speech has been emulated, and a beta is forthcoming. And as soon as I get more information on that, of course, I will share that with you. That's going to wrap up the emulation update this week. It's now time to get on to the good section of the show. It's time for an 8-bit flashback. Do you know this game music This game is probably one of my favorite games of all time on any platform. This is a role-playing game at its finest. The game, of course, is Legacy of the Ancients for the C64. Legacy of the Ancients was the follow-up to SSI's very successful Questron series. This game, released by Electronic Arts, brought C64 role-playing games up to a completely new standard. With incredible graphics, the most realistic sound effects, a huge exterior map, numerous deep-level dungeons, this game took a good, delirious month of my life away, day and night, until the game was complete. As the screenshots are being displayed, you can't help but agree, for an 8-bit game, Legacy of the Ancients is truly beautiful. I was going to play back a longer section of the sound effects for you, but I doubt they would have made it over quite right in real player. Suffice to say that you can hear footsteps, the crackling of torches, the swamp squishing under your feet, the winds of the plains. Atmospherically speaking, this game was truly phenomenal. But let's say that we can the killer graphics and awesome sound. What about gameplay? We know that gameplay is what made 8-bit games so damn good normally, since they didn't have the graphics and sound that the newer games had. So how does Legacy of the Ancients stand up? Supreme, obviously, lest it would be in the show, right? So what sets this ahead of other games like Ultima or Bard's Tale, the other RPGs that were out at this time? Let me set the scene for you. You're a visitor to the planet Tarmalon. You start off disoriented in the Galactic Museum, an attraction placed on numerous planets around the universe for an ancient lost race's amusement. You're given access to the museum as part of your involvement in your quest to render useless a magic companion that cannot be destroyed. Of course, many others seek this magic book and will think nothing of killing you for it. The museum itself is truly unbelievable. A large labyrinth, in other words, you need to map it, of displays compile the museum. Your footsteps echo on the floor as you're walking along. It just sets the mood. And as you walk around the displays and the torches, it's all location-related volume control. The farther you are away from the torch, the quieter it is, and so on. Context-sensitive sound, I guess, is the buzzword for that. And they were doing this back in, like 86, and all the games are just now boasting that. The displays in the museum will offer you different sort of things, perhaps an item or information, or even transport to another location on the planet, including towns and dungeons. The exhibits often require a special Tarmalon coin, like a jade coin or a gold coin or an amethyst coin, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. Some of them are very easy to get. You can get jade coins anywhere, but the amethyst one and other ones, you have to complete different quests necessarily to get. Some of the displays give you gold, and some of them give you weapons. Others will allow you to access hidden areas of the museum, which is really cool. You think that you have the whole museum figured out, and all of a sudden you find a display that will let you open the entire area of a new area of the museum up. There's a caretaker in the museum, and basically he's an exhibit in his own, and he'll summon you back to the museum from time to time, not only to give you valuable information, although this is rare, and you'll usually have to pick this information up from roaming creatures or from fortune tellers in the towns, but mainly he promotes you to higher levels of experience, and this is necessary to increase your base amount of hit points and other attributes. Once you leave the museum, you'll be in one of 3 different areas, either outdoors, in a town, or in a dungeon, usually the first on the list. Outdoors, you move around a variety of landscapes, including mountains with purchased climbing gear, swamps, plains, and even seas and oceans via purchased boats. You'll encounter many creatures outdoors, each with possible information, hostile attacks. Sometimes they'll even sell you items of great value for dirt cheap, things you can't find anywhere else. Some can even be cut up for food after you kill them. Although some are poisonous, you'll figure it out once you've been killed a couple times. In town, you'll walk and transact with townsmen, buying food, healing, information, weapons, magic spells, yada, yada, yada. You'll even play games of chance, which, by the way, will take up a lot of your time since you need a lot of cash to finish the game. The flip-flop game just totally rocks, and I'll try to sync up the screenshot in here somewhere. I played it for just cumulative hours on end. There's also blackjack, which I kept getting my ass kicked, so I didn't play that. But you got to be careful. If you win too much, you'll get booted out of the casino, and all the guards will be alerted that you basically are robbing the casino. And getting out of town will be next to impossible. Remember, you also need information, and the Mystics will charge you a certain amount of cash to reveal secrets. Trust me, the information is worth it. You can even rob the bank as well as make legitimate deposits and withdrawals, which are used in case you die, since you can't take it with you. But don't try to be robbing the bank until you're very powerful. Don't worry, there will come a time in the game that you'll be able to kick every guard's ass in town and walk away laughing without a scratch. There's a castle and a fortress. They play similar to the town scenes using the same basic engine. There are powerful non-player characters scattered throughout the game that can grant you great strength or intelligence, for a price, of course. You can even train in arcade or puzzle games to increase your dexterity and intelligence a few points. These things are required if you're going to finish. And some of the mini games that you play within to increase your intelligence or your dexterity are just totally killing. You'll find yourself going back and playing them just for the fun of it. Finally, you got the dungeons. You'll spend a lot of time in the dungeons. Filled with lots of monsters, traps, treasures, and required items like museum exhibit coins. This uses the similar engine that the museum uses. Some are quite deep, and you'll want to make sure that you are well outfitted with items and magic before you go traipsing in. Some monsters' venoms and attacks can melt your armor and prized weapons, so take extras. And there's nothing worse than losing a special magic item that cannot be replaced. And you'll figure out which monsters you need to re-equip for. Magic in the game is handled through the basic paraphernalia, like wands that have a certain number of charges, potions that you drink once and they're gone, etc., etc. And you buy these usually in certain towns. Holy water will give you portable health that you can carry around, but holy water is not immediately available. The existence of holy water is a quest within itself. All of these sort of little things just jumble together to make Legacy of the Ancients so vast and playable. The game's fairly non-linear, although there are some things you have to do, like figuring out how to get holy water. And there's a huge vastness to the game that makes you feel like it's not going to be over for a while. You can perform many things in any order you want, such as attacking the fortress as a wimp, but you'll pay the price. The towns are many and varied, some having different games of chance, different weapons or items, even different pricing on items. You can buy beasts of burdens or ships at some towns and not at others. Many towns will have to be visited to get certain items. It can also be very economical to visit outlying towns to get better deals and higher quality items. Oh, did I mention that you use up food as you go? Yeah. On foot, you consume a lot of food. On horseback, not much at all. In towns or dungeons, you don't use much either. But you run out of food, and you'll start losing your hit points until death obviously commences. Suffice to say that Legacy of the Ancients' enveloping world is very incredible. Once you get hooked, plan on losing sleep. I spent over a month, as I said before, playing this game, roughly 5 to 6 hours a night. Basically, I lived, ate, breathed, and existed only for Legacy of the Ancients. Let me tell you one last thing. It was worth every single minute of it. The ending of the game is damn near orgasmic. Nothing like, congratulations, you win, and that's it. You walk away from the game feeling incredibly accomplished, and you feel like you actually made a difference in this planet's history. It's amazing. I'm not going to tell you what happens because that would ruin it for you. But I'll tell you, it was the most rewarding experience I've ever had in a game. The original game came with a code wheel to grant you access to the museum. This is obviously copy protection type code wheel stuff, but this is supposed to be an Obsidian code disk that was given to you by the individual that charged you with your quest. There are numerous sites that have workarounds for the code disk, though, and I'll be posting it on my C64 area on Monroe World when I get around to it. The game follows the Questron series, as I mentioned before, and it's followed by The Legend of Black Silver, which was ending up being distributed by Epix. I finished both Questrons, and I definitely plan to play Black Silver someday when I get some free time. Legacy of the Ancients has probably been the most rewarding and entertaining $40 I ever spent. Yeah, in fact, I did buy it. You will need to use CCS64 version 2.0 or later to play this game, since most of the other emus I've seen won't play it right at all. Make sure you use slow loading, and for God's sakes, don't let CCS64 write back to the original Legacy of the Ancients disk images, although it will ask you to do it all the time. If you do, you'll kill your disk image, and you'll have to use a different copy. This is the voice of experience talking here. You will have to figure out how to format a blank image to use as a character save disk. Obviously, anytime CCS64 asks you to write to this disk, you need to tell them that that's okay. I really hope you folks give this game a try. This has been one of those games that I've wished forever somebody would make a modern port of. Even though, adventure games have gone to a completely different scale of Legacy of the Ancients, I really spent a lot of time with that. Well, folks, that will wrap up this episode of Retro Radio. I urge everyone listening to hop on over to www.monroeworld.com and check out all the other goodies that my site offers, including programs and multimedia clips that you just can't live without, my hopefully soon-to-be famous easy guides for getting the most out of your PC, my game emulation pages, and much, much more. As always, I do read and try to reply to every piece of email I get, and I do get a bunch, and I appreciate all of the kind words and suggestions you've all written for the show. My name is Shane R. Monroe from Retro Radio. Until next time, keep it retro.